Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I wanted to talk to you about how to grow 1 to 2 pound heirloom tomatoes and some of the techniques that will help you do that. But first I wanted to show you the Virginia Sweets tomato that we're going to be picking. When we get to the video, you'll notice I'm calling it the Aussie heirloom, and that's just because I'm getting old. But these are the Virginia Sweets. It's a bicolor beefsteak tomato. You can see the red going through the side cut and the red throughout the tomato. It's a very sweet tomato. I think the yellow part of the tomato brings the sweetness, the red part brings the acidity of the tomato. It's a great sandwich tomato, and you can see, you know, the red color through it. It's just a nice meaty tomato. For size, these will get to about a pound, and you can see the cord will give you a perspective on how big this tomato is. And again, just a nice red blush throughout a yellow tomato. Again, this is the Virginia Sweets, and I'm going to talk to you about how to get your 1 pound to 2 pound tomato. Welcome to the Rustic Garden. Today I wanted to talk about growing large tomatoes in your garden. These are heirloom tomatoes. They are Brandywines, and the tomatoes right in the middle are Aussie heirloom tomatoes. When you talk about growing large tomatoes, most people are thinking they want to grow that 1 pound to 2 pound tomato and even bigger. There are a couple of things you need to keep in mind if you're going for large sized tomatoes. You have to plan ahead, and I have a video that talks about pruning your tomatoes down to single stems, double stems, triple stems or more. You really want to keep your tomato plants to 1 or 2 stems when you're trying to grow large heirloom tomatoes, when you want to reach that 1 pound tomato, when you want to get to that 2 pound tomato, when you're growing for size, to show that off. The reason you want to do that is because you don't want a lot of tomatoes, and you can see there aren't many tomatoes growing on this plant. It's a little beat up from the hot weather we had, and this is kind of what happens to my tomatoes in July. But these plants have been growing a long time. There is 1 stem coming up from the ground, and it does branch into 2 stems. My point is, when you have too many stems, you get too many tomatoes, and the tomato then puts its energy into a bunch of tomatoes, and you get nice size fruits, but you're not going to get the 1 or 2 pound tomatoes. So what you have to do is focus the plant to put its energy into making the 6, 7, 8, 9 tomatoes that it'll produce into large 2 pound tomatoes. Now that was a lot to say, and I'll just recap it this way. If a plant has 3 or 4 fruits on it, all the energy is going to go into those tomatoes, and they will get to be a 1 pound, 2 pound tomato. If you have a lot of vines growing and the plant has 15, 20, 30 tomatoes on it, you're going to get a nice crop of tomatoes, but you won't get the record size tomato. So here is the Aussie heirloom, and I'm just going to break that off. And these are all going to get picked, and this plant will be done, because I really only grow them for size. That is, you know, probably not quite a pound, but it's a good sized tomato. There's just some black crimson there. I'm going to pick all these off. And you can see the size. There's one that has a, whoop. That's from a bird biting into the side. That's a smaller one. The 2 up there are still growing. This is a Brandywine red. That's a little bit smaller. Over here are some Brandywine pinks, and you can see on this plant I've already picked some big tomatoes from it, but it has a bunch of smaller green tomatoes on it, so the energy is going into them. Unlike this Aussie heirloom, where I actually took off some of the smaller green tomatoes, but pruned it so that there was only really 1 or 2 main vines here, and tried to keep it to about 6 or 8 tomatoes. And just to give you a reference, that's a cork and a quarter, and it can give you a little bit idea of the size of these tomatoes. It's a pretty good size. The biggest one is probably the first one I picked, and that's probably not quite a pound, but it's up there, and you can see a good sized tomato. And again, if you want to grow our heirloom tomatoes for size, You want to keep them down to about 1 vine or 2 vines. You want to keep the fruit numbers down to about 6 or 8, and just let all the energy of the plant go into those 6 or 8 fruits. And you'll end up with, you know, there's probably 5 pounds of tomatoes in there. If you enjoyed this video, please check out my blog at www.therustedgarden.blogspot.com. Thanks.